everybody. Welcome, everybody, to another Bruce Starr Show. I'm thrilled today to have a very special guest. I love Hollywood. I've always loved Hollywood. I spent 5 years out there in the 80s, and it didn't happen for me the way I wanted it to, and I left. And then I spent 11 years away from LA. And I got to tell you, Lois, Rodney Dangerfield, and I'm going to give you a proper introduction.
Yeah, that's okay.
But Rodney Dangerfield left the business for 10 or 11 years.
Did he really?
Moved back to New Jersey, where he sold aluminum siding.
It's great.
And then he couldn't stand it anymore.
Wow.
And he just started getting back into the business and kapowie. So
Wow.
Lois is I know Lois as a Hollywood-based stand-up comedian. And I didn't know her that much as a sitcom writer, but goodness gracious, an accomplished sitcom writer. She did begin her career as a comedian at the Comedy Store, and I was more of an improv guy. That's probably why we didn't know each other that much.
Yeah.
But she performed in many clubs throughout the United States. She's been on tons of television shows. I happened to watch one last week, and that was kind of fun doing that. So she shared the stage with comedy legends like Roseanne, and we'll talk a lot more about Roseanne, Eddie Murphy, Sandra Bernhard, Robin Williams, and many others. And then she turned her attention to sitcom writing. And Roseanne gave her first break as a writer when she hired Lois for her sitcom show, Roseanne. After 3 seasons, she moved on and she continued to produce and write on many other sitcoms, Drew Carey, Grace Under Fire, and still many others. She does stand-up regularly in London. I would love to see you do stand-up again.
You should come and see it.
Well, maybe one of these days. We'll time it right.
Great.
She performs at the Top Secret Comedy Club. Man, that sounds so cool.
It's so cool.
And now she's writing her first book, the story of her comedy life, called My Dirty Life in Comedy. Well, I am honored to have Lois Bromfield on my show today. Hello, Lois. Thank you so much for doing this with me. I'm excited to.
Me too. But you gave that's a really nice introduction. Do you know that? That's like rarely in my entire career have I ever had such a nice introduction, because usually they give you credits that aren't your credits sometimes, or they just say, coming to our show is this person and this is what she's kind of done and I don't really know her. And it's awful. But you actually did a great. And that's a really nice introduction. You could have just done that and I could have said goodbye. That would have been it.
Oh, thank you. I've actually been hosting television, not on NBC or CBS or anything like that, for 25 years.
Oh, okay. That's why.
This is something I do. I was out of the country, as a matter of fact, for almost 10 years. I was the English voice for the Western Caribbean, for the entire Western Caribbean, for both television and radio for almost 10 years.
Wow.
And had some great experiences there. But I love show business.
Me too.
I love
it.
Getting the history down. I mean, I've had Mark Linnau on the show, Willie Tyler and Lester, Rick Overton, who's a great interview. I had a lot of good friends on the show, and I loved talking about the history. And when I saw that you wrote a book, basically your history in show business, I said, wow, I'd love to have Lois on.
Great. I'm really glad you did. I mean, writing a book is a big pain in the ass. It's not fun. It's not great. It's really lonely. You just sit there and write. And then sometimes you write stuff that nobody cares about, so you have to delete it. But it's, I mean, every comedian's written a book. A lot of them have. And some of them are good. The books are good. The books I don't like on comedy are the ones where they sort of talk about everyone else and not themselves. So when they talk about everybody else and all the things the other comics did and what pissed them off and they didn't make it, those books are boring. But this book is really honestly about how I was young and beautiful, and I was so harassed, but it's really funny. The things I did, the bad things I did, the good things I did, being mistaken for a hooker in Vegas almost every time I went there. They always thought I was a hooker, and it's great. And all the people, the guys that were great to me, all the comedians that were great, and the celebrities, and it's just really, it's gritty, but it's really true, and it's really fun. It's totally fun.
So listen, you're still a hot looking babe, but you really were one of the hottest.
I was cute, young, yeah.
Stand-up comedians out there.
Yeah, but now there's a ton of them. Now there's tons of great looking women, and it's really great. It was awful then, because if you were pretty, it was really hard to be funny. It was really, really hard to do it without falling apart, without feeling criticized. It was awful. But now, and when I go to London and I see the comedians there, it's just it's not a big deal that a woman gets on stage and she's beautiful, or a woman gets on stage and does whatever she does. It's just not. In London, the culture is different. And honestly, I got to tell you, I wish I had gone to London 10 years ago, because my audience is 25 years old. You know, it's unbelievable. The response I got the first time I went there. I thought, okay, I'm in my 60s. I'm not going to go to this club. They're not going to laugh at me. They're young and they're all drinking. And I thought, this is going to be horrible. So I get up there, and I had a set where I couldn't even hear myself talking. They were laughing so hard. It was so great. I loved it. I love it there. You know, so
tell me about young Lois, where young Lois grew up, and how in tarnation did you want to do something as crazy? And we know, it's one of the craziest things that you could possibly do. There's so much intimidation. There's so much rejection. Going out on the road and not being a headliner is like, oh my God, awful.
It's awful.
So tell me, let's go back to your original days. I want to learn more about you.
You do? Oh boy, you're going to drink some coffee.
Yeah.
I'm going to make it shorter. It's not that interesting. I was born in Canada. My parents, everybody was in show business. So my brother went off and became a director really young. My sister she was in Second City in Toronto. And the two of them have huge amounts of credits and film and acting credits. And so when I was 20, I went to New York in the 70s. So it was, I must have been nuts by myself. I decided I wanted to go to New York. I couldn't stay in Canada, because you couldn't do anything in Canada then, and you can't really do anything now. Something's wrong with Canada. I love it, but there's something wrong. I don't know what it is. Like, you can't go there and say, I want to go on and do a set. Oh, well, you have to sign up, and you have to wait for, shut up. You can't, it's not like the States where you could just do something and people go, all right, just come on, go ahead.
You're either good or you're bad. And if you're bad, you're not coming back.
Yeah, you're not coming back. But in Canada, everybody's really worried all the time, and they're always ready to say, I'm sorry for whatever they're doing wrong. It's something's fucked up there. Oops, sorry. But it's fucked up. So I left Canada, went to New York, and New York was scary. And I went to the Improv in New York, and Chris ALBRECHT was so good to me. And I still owe him $800. Can you believe that? I owe him $800 from 40 years ago. It's unbelievable. Yeah, he lent me money. And he never let me forget it. He reminded me later. I'll tell you that if you want. Anyway, so I went to New York and started doing my stand-up, and it was really hard. And then I came to LA. I don't know. I just did it because everybody in my family did it. Everybody in my family did the same thing. Nobody wanted to stay in school. My father was horrible, and my mother was boy crazy, and we just left home. And we just thought, I don't want to work in a store. I don't want to do anything where I have to sit with the same people all the time. I want to go and just, it's ridiculous. You're right. It's hard. You just go out and do something crazy. But that was the family chemistry. That's how it was. So so I went out and I did my stand-up, and then I came to California, and I just, that you go in the 80s, it was the comedy boom. So it was really great to walk in and just do your stand-up, and everybody was there. Everybody. David Letterman was still performing when I was there in the beginning.
Who walked you in? Who walked you in?
Who walked me in?
To the Comedy Store. Did you go yourself, or?
Yeah, I walked in and signed up on an amateur night and went on stage and did, 3 minutes, and Mitzi liked me, and I was lucky. Mitzi liked, the thing was, if Mitzi liked you, you could get on stage. And if she didn't like you, it didn't matter if you were good or not. She didn't like you personally, then you were out. So she liked me, and I just started going on stage and doing not great material in the beginning. It took a long time. Well, you know, it takes a long time to get good at it, but I was good enough. And so, yeah, so I just did an amateur night like everybody else. And then I just kept doing it, you know, and went on the road, hated the road. I hated the road, hated it. Oh, I hated it. I hated the clubs. I hated the club owners. I hated it. I just wanted to do television. That was it. And when I'd go on the road, I would take, do you remember Steve Moore? You remember Stevie Moore?
No.
Oh, shoot. Steve Moore was this great gay guy. We got married so I could get a green card. And this doesn't matter that I'm saying that now because I live in Germany and who cares. But, and we were married for 15 years and we actually became a really good couple. We loved each other. He was a great guy.
Wow.
He died in 2015, but he was my buddy. Everybody knows him. I can't believe you don't know Stevie Moore. Wow.
Nope.
Okay. Well, I don't know where I was going with this, but anyway, he was my pal, and you know, we became friends and went on the road together, and so.
You know, I know so many of the comedians that are by themselves, on their own,
yeah,
living a one-dimensional life. I know a lot of comedians that never had girlfriends.
wow,
hardly didn't have boyfriends or whatever it was.
right,
And that was really hard for them. They had so little activity outside the world. So to hear you say that you had someone that you could depend on and share your day with, because when you come home from those comedy clubs in Utah and those comedy club owners are, I can say it now, I'm not in the business, they're obnoxious, they're pushy, not very refined people. They say the wrong things at the wrong time to everybody. It's kind of tough when you do that for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. I can only imagine. So I'm glad to hear that you had a mate that you could count on who you love.
Yeah, I mean, I had girlfriends. I had my girlfriends, and he was my friend, but he was a good friend. He was a partner. He was like a life partner. But I had tons of girlfriends, but most of them were okay. You know, I had relationships with my partners, but it wasn't the same as him because he was just like a soulmate, and you know, he was just a great guy. So he got me through a lot of it, a lot of times on the road and things that, I mean, gigs that were so horrible. And the thing is, the gigs didn't get you anywhere. It wasn't like it pushed you up the ladder. All it did was give you some crappy money and make you feel terrible about yourself or about your act, because you'd go to Orlando and do your act and you wanted to cut your wrist afterwards because the audiences were so horrible and the guys were drunk and throwing things. And you just think, what am I doing this for? Why am I doing this? So that's what, and I know comics that went on the road, like you said, they go on the road and they're on the road all the time. And good for them. I don't know how they did it, honestly. I give them a lot of credit.
And then when they're on the road, they certainly can't be auditioning for pilots and you know, walk-on roles. It was a terrible catch-22.
Yeah, it really was. It really was.
I remember how hard Jay worked. No one worked any harder than Jay. Yeah. But look what happened to Jay.
Yeah.
So
but he's had a great life, though. He's had a big, long career. What happened to him? He had a big show for a long time, and he's rich, isn't he? He's got to be rich. So he's rich. He's rich. He's got to do something else.
He would go from, I remember him on his motorcycle going from the Comedy Store down to the Improv and out to, you know, Manhattan Beach. And then, and that's when he was in town. He was constantly working. So there is something to working, of course. We know that. To get yourself up to 45 minutes is, you know, let me hear about that. What was that like for you to be able to go from being a middle to a headline?
But you know what? My headlining career didn't really happen in the irregular clubs. I mean, I went and did the clubs and I was headlining, but my career as a headline act really took off in the gay community because, because of a video I did in 1985 that became a big cult hit with the gay community in West Hollywood and all over the country. So when I would go to straight clubs, excuse me, and perform, I was headlining and I did really well, but they would come up to, gay guys would come up to me and they say, "You're so funny. We want you to come to our club." So I would go and they would book me in a bar where there was like 800 people in a little bar, and I would perform there and make more money, and just, they were more loyal, you know. And it wasn't really a comedy club. It was like what Bette Midler got to do, where she got to go, and her fame came from that. And so that, they really supported me. And so my headlining career wasn't, I guess I did okay for a few years, but honestly, I was better in the gay clubs. I did better there.
So tell me about what it was like, because show business is still a pretty conservative, especially back in the 80s. Pretty conservative business. I mean, there's certain things you can step outside the line and other things you couldn't. What was it like? I mean, look, we all know what happened with Ellen when she came out and she lost her sitcom, and it's a pretty straight and narrow mind out there. So tell me, walk me through what it was like when you either decided to come out, maybe you never, maybe you were always out, but what was that like? How different was it?
I was never out. I never came out in my act because everybody told me not to do it. So everyone told me not to do it. And they said, don't come out in your act because it'll ruin your career. You won't be able to get work. And this was in the 80s and early 90s. And they were actually right. So I didn't do it. But everybody knew I was gay. Everybody in the clubs, all the comics knew. I made it known. And so it kind of didn't matter. But my act my act felt really like an act because I wasn't being honest about who I was. And then I guess, like I said, I was leading a double life. So I was doing my act in the clubs, and then I was doing my gay act in the gay clubs, saying I was gay. And to be honest with you, I'm 65 now. And when I started working in London, that was the first time, honestly, in a regular club that I could come out completely. And it was really, it was the most comfortable thing I'd ever gotten a chance to do. I waited this long. And when I came out in the clubs, like in New York, or when I sort of came out in LA, it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same response. And I don't know whether it's because, like you said, that people are still so tense about it, so uptight. But it wasn't until the last 3 years when I went to London and I started talking about being a lesbian and my partner, they love it. And so I don't know what to tell you. It took a long time. And I think I did an article in The Advocate in like 1991. And my agent said to me, "You shouldn't have done that." I'm like, "Oh, why?" He said, "Because now everybody knows you're gay." I said, "Everybody knew it anyway. Everybody knows it." But, you know, it was hard because men came on to me all the time, and guys would proposition me, and I would have to just tell them, you know, and I would have to just say, "I'm gay." And they go, "Oh, well, that's okay." That was the best response. "That's okay. I like that." No, you don't understand. I don't want to have sex with you. "Yeah, that's okay. We don't want to have sex with me." It's like, what? So yeah, it's still not fun. I mean, there's lots of women who I really think it's probably easier for an American comedian to come over here and perform in Europe. I think it's easier, and people are different, maybe nicer. I don't know, liberal. I do my stand-up sometimes, and I'll do it maybe 4 times a year in London, and then the rest of the time I'm writing. So, yeah.
Can we step back to the 80s? I would love to hear from, you know, what you wrote in your book, and what was going on there, not just with you, but around you, with the comedians, your experiences. I'd like to, you know, delve a little bit more into it.
I don't know. I mean, what was going on? Like I told you before, I'm not sure I remember that much about it, the 80s. I mean, I got there in 1980, and there was the strike. And then, of course, I crossed the picket line like an idiot because I was young, and I thought, you know what, I just want to perform. I had no clue what was going on. And in my book, I write about it, and I say, you know, a lot of people have given me a hard time about that after all these years. And in my book, I addressed that. And I said, you know, I didn't know what the fight was, and I didn't care because I was young and stupid, and I went in and performed. And I regretted it for a long time. But you know, thank goodness they did that, because if they didn't have that protesting and they didn't strike, she would have never paid anybody. She never would have paid anyone, and neither would have Bud either. I mean, they just wouldn't have paid anyone. It would have been she was rich enough, you know, she was rich enough. But yeah, the 80s was that was the first big stumbling block for me, was the strike. And then After a couple of years, I really got into performing there, and there was lots of comics. I mean, Larry Miller was still there. Remember,
I
Larry
love
Miller?
Larry.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love
he was
that.
around, and like I said, David Letterman was just, and Michael Keaton performed in the. I mean, there was people there that you just kind of went, wow. It was almost like you just saw them for a second, like a ghost, and then you never saw them again, because the next thing they were famous, or they were doing movies or whatever. But yeah, it was a really strange time because I was really young, and the club was so great. And performing there was amazing. And my act would just bomb, and sometimes it would kill. And then I would go in the main room, and I'd say to Mitzi, I don't want to perform in the belly. I hated the belly room. Hated it. I hated the belly room. And I'd say to her, I don't want to perform up there. Why are you putting the women up there? It's different now, but I mean, then it was just, she just put the women upstairs, and you rarely got a chance to go in with where the men were performing. And I was like, I don't want to do that. I want to perform why are you separating people? So she liked me, so she let me perform in the main room. But the 80s was, I mean, it was a struggle. You were brought on stage like you were a novelty, hey, a woman's coming up. It was ugly. A lot of it was really, really ugly. And going to Vegas and performing at the Dunes was great. And I used to get to go there with guys like Sam Kinison performed there. We drove together to Vegas one time. We just talked about pussy the whole time. My partner is German. So when I invite her to a comedy show, she doesn't laugh at anything. It's great. It's just great. She laughs at nothing. But yeah, so the 80s was like that. I mean, Sam Kinison was still okay, and everybody was David Tyree and Argus Hamilton. I mean, it was all of that. Everybody was, everybody was 25. And we'd go to Vegas, and everybody would just drink themselves to death and do a show. And it was outrageous. It was really outrageous, but it was hard because I had to try to figure out how to be funny, and the whole pretty thing got in the way. It got in the way, and being gay. And so you kind of go, how do I juggle these things, to just have people pay attention to what I'm saying, or just let them get the jokes and not look at my face or think, oh, she's a lesbian. I remember one time I heard an audience member in La Jolla. We were all sitting in the green room, and I heard this couple, they were walking out, and I heard them say, I think that blonde woman's a lesbian. It was so great. It was so funny to hear that. I laughed so hard. I thought, I got to come out. Everybody knows it. I'm walking like somebody's dad. It's like, the way you don't have to be brilliant to figure it out. But yeah, the 80s was a trip. Well, you were there. I mean, it was.
Well, I'll tell you, I had some really incredible memories. One was that Billy Crystal started coming by and started developing his characters. And then he did Saturday Night.
Yeah.
And then there was this really tall, neurotic Jewish guy who bombed terribly. And I remember walking towards the big room at the Improv, and he came out of the room, and he was sweating, and he was so pissed. He was cursing. He was looking at himself in the mirror. And, then all of a sudden, Curb Your Enthusiasm,
Oh, wow. Yeah. Larry David? Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what, though? He bombed all the time. He bombed at the Improv in New York. He bombed his ass off. He was so weird.
Exactly.
He was so weird. But you know what? He was great. He had a brilliant mind. And George Carlin one time I got to work with George Carlin in my life. I'm so happy. I did a sketch on a show of his, and I was so lucky to even meet him, but to work with him, I was really honored. And he said to me, you know what, just do whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter. You'll find your audience. You have to just stick to what you think is good.
Find your audience, right.
Yeah.
So I don't even, you wouldn't know this, but did you know the name Barry Martyr?
No.
Okay, so he was a writer, and he was best buddies with Glenn Super.
I remember Glenn Super.
Mr. Bullhorn.
Yeah, I loved him.
He opened for, he opened for, who'd you just say you opened for? George Carlin. He opened for George Carlin, and we all went by. It was right in Universal Studios or something, and I got a chance to meet George. And I mean, a lot of beautiful things. I used to travel with some of my stand-ups that I represent, and I went out to Las Vegas, and one time Wood, introduced me to Oh gosh. Anyway, I'll think of this just like you.
Okay.
Some of it's a fog. But it was really an incredible time.
Yeah.
Marty Cohen was someone who I got to know, Party and Marty Hardy from that show. It was really an incredible, and one of the most interesting interviews that I did was with Rick Overton.
I bet.
Just a couple of weeks, he's one of the headiest comedians, out
Yeah.
there. But he came on my show a couple of weeks after Robin passed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, he and Robin were really best.
Yeah.
They used to come in at 12:30 and just in the improv and just tear up the place. Spend the next half hour, an hour just doing improv. But he was really, really shaken.
Yeah, I bet.
By Robin, and gave me some incredible insights about what he thought was going on with Robin in his later years. So, I mean,
yeah, that was sad when he died.
So let's talk a little bit more about your book. We've been talking all about that, of course, but when can people? When will they be able to read your book, find your book online, whatever it is? Tell me about it.
I'm gonna. You know what? I'm going to do an Audible. I'm gonna do an audio book because the problem is I can do I can print it and distribute it and push it, and I have a publisher in New York who's interested in it, which is amazing because it's really hard to get a publisher. And the reason I got this guy is because he was a fan of mine, a gay guy who was a fan of mine from the 80s, from my video that I did. He became a publisher. It's such an incredible coincidence. And he found me on Twitter and he said, if you're writing a book, I would like to know what it is because I'm a fan. So I wrote a little blurb and I said, here's what it's about. It's about my stand-up career, but it's pretty gritty and it's really good and funny. It's tons of jokes and all that. So he said, okay, well, I'm interested in. So that was, 8 months ago. That's how long it's taken me to write it. So now I'm almost finished. And then I told him I'd like to do an audio book because I think an audio book would be great. And I get to read it and make sense, it'd be funnier to read, but we'll see. So now I'm going to put it out on, I don't know, I'm just going to, when the time comes, it probably won't be till September. When the time comes for people to find it, I'll make sure they can find it, or he'll make sure they can find it.
What a great idea doing an audio, because unfortunately, who has time to read books now?
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah.
I have a couple of books in front of me that I really, really wanted to read, and all I could get through was like 2 or 3 pages at a time. But people are listening. People are watching YouTubes and listening. So I think it's a brilliant idea to do an audio. I think you'll get heard a lot more than
I do too. Yeah, I think it's a better idea because I think people have their attention span is so bad. So I think it's easier. And plus, I think it's more fun. I think it's more fun to hear me reading it than it is to read it. And like you said, nobody has time to read and nobody has the attention span to read. But I'm really excited only because I've never written a book. And writing sitcoms I did for years. And that's just a completely different process. But writing the book is it's murder. I sit down, I get up at 6 a.m. I take my dog out for a walk, I come back, and then I just have to start writing. But I'm in Germany too. So I'm just like, I just want to go do something else. And you have to really discipline yourself to sit there and do it. So I'm finished with it. I'm doing like my 4th version of it. But it took 8 months to write a memoir. And that's a long time to write a memoir. So it's actually too long. So now I'm done. But I can't wait for you to read it. I can't wait for everyone who knows comedy to read it.
Yeah, I'm excited. Joey Kamen, he was there when you were there.
Yes.
He wrote a really interesting book, a tell-all.
Did he?
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he's been on the show. I have his book here somewhere.
How is it? Is it good? Do you like it?
I mean, I love learning about history. It was great having Mark on the show talking about his experience at the Improv and with Bud, and now I don't know if you know this, but Mark and his wife, everything is still cool, still together. They've come up with something for Broadway.
Yeah, they should. How come they don't?
No, they have.
Oh, they did. Oh, good.
Yeah, it's been a big hit, and they've even won awards. You know,
What?
Google it. Google it. Yeah,
I didn't know that.
yeah,
You mean Joanne Astro? Is that her name?
yeah,
I didn't know that. That's amazing.
yeah.
Wait, is Bud Friedman still on the planet? He didn't die, did he?
I don't. I think he's still here, but he's out of the improv now.
Yeah, I know that, but he's got to be in
I
his
think
80s.
he's still here. I think he's still here.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing. All that history with the improv. I mean, if it wasn't for the improv in New York, I would have never had a comedy career. Because when Chris Albrecht took me in, and I was so poor, I had no money, and I was living in this woman's hotel in this weird, I didn't know it was actually a crack house. It was actually, I thought it was this really nice hotel, which is women. I thought, oh, I had a room and everything, but it was actually for addicts, recovering addicts. It was really, it's in my book. I talk all about it. It's really, it's crazy and actually funny bad. But Chris Albrecht, I never forgot him. He just was so kind. And at one point, years later, Roseanne, before I started writing on the show, they asked me to audition for a part in the show. And I can't act, and I couldn't do it. I never had the acting chops to get jobs like that. And I went in and I thought for sure I was going to get it, and I didn't get it. And I got really upset. I was like crying in the elevator, and Roseanne and Tom were there. Yeah, you're okay. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Chris Albrecht walks into he's like, the elevator door's open. I don't know where we were. And he just walked in, and I was crying. And he said, hey, how you doing? What's the matter with that? He said, hey, you owe me $800. It's like, yeah, I know I owe you $800. I'm sorry, but I'm crying right now. And Roseanne's like, I'll give you the $800. It was so crazy, that moment. I didn't see him again ever after that. And I never paid him back like an asshole. So now I got to pay him back.
I actually have a Chris Albrecht story also.
You
Barry
do?
Martyr, Barry Martyr, who's a writer for a lot of stand-up comedians, Gabe Kaplan, Letterman. I mean, I can go on and on and on. So he wrote something, and I was coming in as the producer, and I think we had Alan Landsberg Productions. Wow. And we went into Chris to pitch him a multi-series show for HBO. And this would have changed everything. And we were sitting there, and we pitched him the idea, and he said, no, I don't think so.
Just like that.
Does that sound like him, right?
Yeah, totally. That's totally him.
Right? So our lives just went from...
That's exactly what he would do. No, because he...
No, I don't think so.
That's great. It's just a big no. And then you can't come back from that.
There's no coming back. There's no coming back. No.
I love, no.
And then I have a writer's strike story.
Oh God, that's hilarious.
I was in Boston. We're almost the same age. I was in Boston, and a couple of guys come back to Boston where they went to college. I won't mention any names. It doesn't matter if I do, but you won't know them anyway.
That's okay, yeah.
Back to party, and we were hung out and had a great time together for a couple of weeks. And they said, "So what are you doing?" I said, I'm kind of retired. I had a jewelry business, but I'm kind of retired. Why don't you come out to LA? Wow. So they were both saying, if you come out to LA, we'll kind of help you along a little bit. So yeah. I packed up everything and I moved out to LA in 1981.
Oh, wow.
And one of the guys helped me. He put me on a show called Making a Living with Ann Jillian. I was an extra, which was a thrill.
Yeah.
So I have, we share a little bit of the same kind of.
Yeah, totally the same. Yeah, that's really funny. I love the thing with Chris Albrecht. Yeah, that's exactly right. He just would say no. He would say to me, I'd go to the Improv and I'd go on stage, and it was like 1:00 in the morning, and there was nobody there, just drunk people and the waitresses. And I said, how is this helping me? He said, just do it. You're just getting it was such torture to start off that way in the Improv. And you just got good. You got better fast, but he was so tough. And then I'd say to him, I'm going to go back. I'm going to go out to LA. I don't want to be here. He said, okay, you shouldn't go yet. You should stay another year. And I didn't, but all that history, like you said,
he's a smart guy, and he probably gave you some good advice.
Yeah, he did. I loved him. He is a great guy. I have to pay him back someday. but I don't know how old he is. He's got to be in his 70s. Like everybody's in their 60s or 70s. Everybody or dead.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Isn't that bizarre? It's bizarre.
You talked about waitresses. You know, there was a real cute waitress, redheaded waitress who I had a little bit of a crush on back then. And she was very nice. And we got to be a little friendly. And then I left. And she went on to be one of the big writers for Dream On.
Oh, wow.
Remember Dream On and HBO?
Yeah.
So sometimes it pays to, hang in there and talk to people, even as a waitress.
No, I was going to say, look at Ellen DeGeneres, though. I remember Ellen, at one point, my girlfriend and I got together with her and her girlfriend at the time. This is a long time ago. I don't even know what year it is. It's way before her show, it's way before even Seinfeld got his show. So it's a long time ago. And we got together, and all she did was talk about making it. And all she wanted to align herself with was people who were doing well. She was so smart. I just, I didn't focus on it that hard. It was like, it wasn't the end of, I didn't have to know the right people. I didn't have the time. I was too busy having fun, and so she was smart. She just made herself,
I can't believe I have an Ellen story to share with you.
Tell me.
This is unbelievable. So I was working with Howie Rapp up in the 9200 Sunset Building, and I was trying to get my performers parts on sitcoms.
Right.
And I had 35 comedians at the time, and I get this big envelope, and I open it up, and it's this really gawky-looking, funny-looking girl.
Yeah.
With blonde hair and beautiful eyes.
Yeah.
And her pictures were blurry. And, she says, I'm looking for LA representation. And I said, no. Your pictures are awful. I don't really see any kind of,
You're an idiot. You're
right?
a complete idiot.
And no. So it was Ellen, right? And people say to me, what are you, stupid? How can you not recognize? And I said, look.
But how would you know, though? How would you recognize it?
I said, look, she would have had 10 agents by the time she got anywhere. There's no way I could have launched her or anyone could have known.
Funny.
It was so goofy looking in these pictures. I still have them somewhere because they were like so funny looking.
Well, she did really well, and I never understood it because I never thought she was really funny, but I understood why she made it. She fit perfectly into the machine, and she did very palatable, easy listening stuff, But when she just came out on her show, when she lost her series, and she just changed, and she became just like, you know what, fuck you guys. I'm gay. I'm a lesbian. I don't care. I love her for that. That to me that was hard knocks for her to come through all of that, from being the goofy girl who couldn't even get a job to all the way through that to now, where she's just, and people say things about her. She wasn't nice. She's not nice to people, whatever. You know what? She broke a lot of rules, and it paid off. And I give her a lot of credit and respect for that.
And
amazing.
I love what she did with her generosity and getting all these companies and giving all this money away and making people's lives better. She's gonna run into some tough times now, but
she will.
She did great work. So I want people to find out about your book, your website, if they want to get in contact with you. How do they do that?
So you know what? My website is I've got to change it because it's so stupid. LoisBromfunny.com. I don't know why it's Lois Bromfunny. I got to change it. It sounds like something a kid made up when they were, I don't know, a kid at a party. But that's the name of it, LoisBromfunny.com. And the name of the book is My Dirty Life in Comedy. But you know what? I would love anybody to if you go to my website, you'll see an excerpt from the book. I'm going to put another one in another couple of weeks. But I think September is probably when it's going to come out. I think September, October, maybe. I may be pushing it a little too soon. Maybe September, October, probably.
And why don't we stay in touch?
Yeah, why don't we?
After we get this rather unprofessional show.
Totally unprofessional.
That we can enjoy for a while. Maybe closer to September. I don't mind. I would, maybe we do it again.
This time I will put my phone on a stand, on a thing, and then I won't move it. I won't go to the kitchen and get water, and Anne won't be naked, and the dog won't bark.
That might help. All those things might just make it a little bit better.
I will promise you, I find a place to go where there's no interest. But I didn't know this was going to happen. I live in this is hell here. I mean, it's good, it's great, but everybody's running around like an idiot.
But listen, I love doing this show with you.
I loved it too. You're really fun to talk to. You're really fun to talk to. I mean, a lot of interviews are not like this. Well, you must know that they're terrible. So this is pretty good. All right.
Thank you.
Well, you're great. So
God bless.
Yeah, let's do it again in September when I'm not holding this with my hands.
And if you want to, because I know how things get delayed, if you want to contact me when you're getting really close, so I don't have to keep saying, is it ready? Is it ready? I don't want to.
No, I will contact you. In fact, I will, for sure. I will contact you and let you know and make sure you get a book immediately. And then you can look it over a little bit or listen to it or whatever. And then we can do an interview then or something like that.
And also, if any of the other folks that that you're still in contact with,
sure.
I love the idea of getting history down. I'd love to connect with anybody that you think, would have be a good interview and have knowledge about those golden days. Boy, did you get on Evening at the Improv? Were you on Evening at the Improv?
No, they hated me because of the strike, remember?
No, the TV show Evening at the Improv.
No. No.
Okay.
I didn't do that. Evening at the Improv, no.
But I did see a couple of the shows. I did see your video that you talked about that's become a huge hit. Hysterical. I love it. And
it's crazy.
I want to go more into this in another couple of months.
Okay, we will. I'll make sure I keep in touch with you. Thanks very much for putting up with all my craziness here.
God bless. See you again soon.
You too. Bye.
Excellent.
Bye. Bye. That was so much fun.